So, when I was a kid, I had one dream. That was to become a taxi driver. But not just any taxi driver, a Muppet space taxi driver. So you had seen this episode of the Muppet Babies where Kermit becomes a taxi driver and he gives an astronaut a ride to the moon. And at 4 years old, I'd never seen anything like it. I had no idea a job like that existed. I mean, how cool would it be to get to take a taxi to the moon? Now, to my disappointment and probably my parents' relief, I failed to become a Muppet space taxi driver. But I think it's funny how these memories stick with you. Just a few weeks ago, I was here in Zimbabwe, and I caught a cab, and as I got into it, that memory came back to me, and it got me thinking about all my life's goals and dreams and ambitions, and everything that I'll fail to become. Things like my World Series MVP award, becoming the youngest person to summit Mount Everest, Hollywood heartthrob, and of course, Muppet. You know, we say things like anything is possible, but maybe that's actually not true, and maybe that's okay. Now, in my role at MSR, I spend my days staring at these big global problems, these challenges that, let's face it, are probably insurmountable in my lifetime. But I believe that our inability to completely resolve a problem should not stand in the way of our drive to solve that problem. And so, at MSR, we specialize in creating outdoor gear to keep people alive in the harshest of conditions. And when our products fail, they put real lives at risk. And in the context of global health, the stakes are even higher. So as we sit here this week and we listen to a lot of really cool speakers talk about their organizations and their ideas and their incredible accomplishments, I want to talk about something that we don't always talk about: failure. I want to talk about how we've failed repeatedly and with the best intentions. I want to share what nearly 50 years of pushing products to their breaking point has taught us about failure, about learning from failure. And I want to share a little bit about our role today in solving a global crisis, the safe water crisis. Now, this story starts in 1998 with a really complex challenge based on really simple high school chemistry, which is ironic because 1998 is the same year that I failed high school chemistry. The chemistry was creating chlorine. The challenger was the US Department of Defense, and the challenge was to miniaturize industrial-sized chlorine generation technology down to the size of a pen so that soldiers could carry them with them in the field. So when most people think of chlorine, they think of a swimming pool or household bleach. To a lot of people, the smell is almost visceral. But chlorine's a lot more prevalent and also a lot more of a privilege than you probably realize. In 1997, Life magazine declared the chlorination of our drinking water supply to be the most significant public health advancement of the millennium. In our country, we've been using chlorine in our municipal water systems for over a century. We just turn on the water on the tap and out comes safe water. And except in rare circumstances, we don't have to think twice. And so, while there's a lot of really great organizations working to solve the water access problem, in some ways, we're just trading one problem for another. People don't just need access to water, they need access to safe water. It's estimated that half of the hospital beds in the world are occupied by somebody suffering an illness related to water or sanitation. And in low-income countries, it's as high as 80%. And over the course of my few minutes up here on stage today, over a dozen children will die from a water-related disease. And so that's why, miniaturizing this technology was so important, especially for the military, who have to perform at elite levels in parts of the world where access to safe water isn't readily available. In 2003, half of the transportation missions in Iraq were to take bottled water to our troops. And so, like any company, when faced with a challenge, we put our brightest minds on it. So these were people that had engineered stoves to survive polar conditions or worked on water systems for NASA's manned mission to Mars. And not surprisingly, they did it. And it was everything that we hoped it would be. In 2003, we launched the Myox Purifier, aka the Myox Pen. This little device weighs just about 3.5 ounces and is about 7 inches long. And it uses electricity from a battery to convert common table salt and water into chlorine. It was hailed as a huge innovation to support the health and safety of our military, and quickly became the #1 selling purifier in the outdoor market. And we won accolades from the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Newsweek, and even a highly coveted award from Popular Science. We couldn't lose. And then about a year after we launched the Myox Pen, a devastating tsunami hit Southeast Asia, causing widespread destruction. Our company and mainly our employees felt really compelled to help. And so MSR sent 1,000 of these devices, along with 2,000 water storage bags, to help in the relief efforts. And I'd like to say that this act of compassion, the largest philanthropic act in our company's history, was a huge success, and we saved thousands of lives. The truth is, it was an epic failure. When the devices arrived, replacement batteries weren't available. People didn't understand how to use them, and the instructions weren't translated into the local languages, and the devices were basically rendered useless. And with the best intentions, we failed. So I reflect on that story as kind of a defining moment in our company's history. As we kind of looked at the magnitude of our failure, we stared down two paths. We could say, hey, we're just an outdoor company, so let's stick to what we know. Or we could really explore how our expertise and technologies could be adapted to help people living in low resource settings in emerging markets. As Henry Ford said, failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. And so that's exactly what we did. We studied our failure to learn from our mistakes. First, we learned the importance of scale. A device that's made to treat water for one person doesn't do a lot of good when 1.8 billion people drink from a fecally contaminated water source. So we unminiaturized the device, still keeping it small and portable, but allowing it to treat water for entire communities. Second, we learned the importance of locally available resources. So critical components for resupply have to be available in any market. So among other things, we took out the batteries, and it now runs off any motorcycle or car battery that's available. Third, we learned the importance of understanding our audience. We know our outdoor users really well. In fact, probably anybody in our company fits that bill, but we didn't know a lot about these new end users or how they interacted with our products. In the outdoor industry, people spend thousands of dollars on gear. And in a lot of these places, people live on less than $2 a day. So since 2004, we spent years in the field studying how people interact with our technologies and have simplified the device so that even primary school-age children can teach others how to use it. Fourth, we learned the importance of logistics. A lot of these places that lack access to safe water are remote. Thus, getting resources to them is very challenging, especially in a natural disaster. So, we've removed the batteries, and there are no moving parts, so that our devices can be stored long-term and pre-positioned for use. And so, after 11 years of iterating and testing and failing, and learning and testing and failing some more, in 2015 we launched this, the MSR Community Chlorine Maker. So using just salt, water, and electricity from any 12-volt battery, in just 5 minutes it'll produce enough chlorine to treat 200 liters of water, supporting entire communities. And so, lost my train of thought, excuse me. And so, just like in, And so just last year, we were able to produce over 500,000 liters of chlorine on just 170 of these devices in Mali, Mauritania, and Kenya with our partners World Vision. And so when Hurricane Matthew struck Haiti last year, we were ready, sending 100 devices to treat water for over 200,000 people in the most remote and hardest hit areas of the country. But here's the thing, we didn't resolve the water crisis, nor is it a problem that we think we could resolve on our own. The fifth lesson we learned was the importance of partners. Just like in the outdoor industry, where we rely on a network of distributors and retailers and athletes, in global health, to be successful in global health, it also requires a strong network of partners. And so we've been very fortunate to have partners like World Vision and Operation Blessing on our team, as well as Path, who we co-developed the product with. And so as I rode along in that taxi in Zimbabwe, it got me thinking about everything that we need to do to be successful. It got me thinking about our successes in Mali and Kenya and everything that we've learned since that failure in 2004. And it got me thinking about all my failures and what they've taught me. And I thought about the Muppets. See, what I've learned about failure is that it's all in how you define it. Just because I failed to become a Muppet space taxi driver, I never stopped shooting for the moon. And I learned that sometimes we get so locked in to what we think we're supposed to be that we fail to realize what we're capable of becoming. And I think that's true both as individuals and as organizations. We get so locked into what a for-profit or a nonprofit is supposed to be or supposed to look like, and we let that serve as a barrier or a boundary. Sometimes it serves as a barrier to entry. Sometimes it serves as a wall to protect us from something that maybe we're afraid of, something we might fail at. And so that's what I want to leave you guys with today. Our success was not a metric quantified by ounces or liters of chlorine. Our success is that we were able to realize that we could be so much more than just an outdoor company. So we design, engineer, and manufacture innovative products to meet basic human needs of food, water, and shelter. Whether that's for a climber on an expedition, a soldier in the battlefield, or for a child growing up in the Kibera slums of Nairobi. And it's a mission that we continue to pursue with new products that'll treat 15,000 liters of water an hour, or for hand washing stations for rural primary schools, small-scale desalination units for soldiers in the field, our work on the Gates Toilet of the Future, and about a dozen other projects. But as we learned, we can't do these things on our own. And so as we work on new products and new projects, we need new partners to help collaborate on technologies with, provide critical funding, or to help us get these innovative solutions into the hands of the people that need them. And so as we work together to solve these problems, we need to support each other and learn from each other, both from our successes and our failures. We need to push each other beyond our simplest assumptions and seek new solutions to these problems and to challenge our purpose. And so as we listed all these people this week, I want to commend all the other speakers, not for their successes, but for their wins. Not for their wins, but for their many failures. For the setbacks and sleepless nights and weekends in the office, all the other unglamorous moments that never make the highlight reel. And I encourage you to share your failures so that others may learn from them, because I believe that it's through these learnings that our community will thrive and that we can really start working together to create real impactful change in the world. Thank you.
All right, so we will take a couple minutes to answer any questions that you guys might have. If anyone would like to raise their hand, I can bring the mic over to you.
Hi, my name is Lauren, and...
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit, yeah.
My name's Lauren, and I work with data analysis, and I was curious, what kind of work you do to determine where to put these water stations and how to figure out how to get them into the hands of who needs them the most.
It's a great question. Most of that side is through our partners. So we let them say this is where they need them the most and this is how many we need and all of those things. And we focus on the technology development. But with some of our other devices, I mentioned one that will treat 15,000 liters of water an hour. That's currently a project we're working on that's funded by the Conrad and Hilton Foundation through PATH. And that will have data logging capabilities. So we'll be able to track them, track how much is being produced, whether it's used for water treatment or disinfection in clinics or a variety of other things that it can be used for. And then we can also know if they break down and why they're breaking down, and we can continue to improve upon them.
Here we go.
Patrick, in terms of training the local population, probably your partners would do that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you safeguard, you've got two toxic products there, sodium and chloride. How do you safeguard against applying the improper amount of chlorine to the water? And what do you do with the sodium?
Yeah, great question. So we actually have one set up down in the lab if you want to take a look at it and see how it works. But so the salt is just any common table salt that you can find anywhere in the world, and we've tested some really dirty salts that we've found in some of the most far-flung remote places. So it's just salt and water mixed together into a brine, and then through the electrolysis process converted to chlorine. So yes, once you have chlorine, you do have a chemical, and the way that we work with that is that it's a 0.8% solution, so it's much lower than household bleach or chlorine you might use for your pool. And it's done that way so that the amounts that you're making can be specifically dosed into the water. So our device will stop every time it reaches 0.8%, and then the amount that's in that can be dropped right into 200 liters of water, or use a little scoop to dose into jerry cans at 20 liters, and then it's got a storage bottle that it comes with as well. In most cases, the devices are kind of owned by somebody within the community that handles water treatment for the entire community, and so they're the ones actually dosing the chlorine, and they've been trained how to do it.
Any other questions?
Sorry, are you allowed to tell us what the cost is to manufacture one of these, approximately?
I won't say the cost to manufacture, but
Yeah.
we retail them. I mean, you can buy one on our website for $239,
Okay.
or we have NGO pricing, and then get down. We get down to about $100.
Okay, that's
depending. So we make it very affordable. We are a for-profit company, so we have to make money so we can reinvest in new technologies. But we do seek a lot lower margins for these types of products than we do for that $400 tent, for example. So the fact that they have no moving parts means they'll last a long time. So we say 5 years. We have really early prototypes that are 7, 8 years old in really rough conditions in like Peru, and they're still working just fine. Yeah.
How do you track the story around it once they get deployed, or do you track the story once it gets deployed?
We're still learning to do that. We mostly through our partners. They like World Vision, for example, when they go into a community, they commit to that community for 15 years. So they don't just drop and run and nobody ever hears from them again type of a situation. So we can go back to the field and visit those people and see what's going on and collect those stories at that time.
Any other questions?
Cool.
I'd like to add one question, just in terms of like finding new partners, and what does the process look like, and what is your reasoning for the partners that you pick, and is it something where they're reaching out to you, or is it only in like a time of need? Do you reach out and find partners, or how does that process work?
It all depends. I mean, coming to events like this and collaborating with people is a great first step. We have people that reach out to us every day, and we reach out to others every day as well. we partner in a variety of ways. Some of them are very transactional and just selling the product. Others are working together to help fundraise for that organization to get them the money that they need to be able to buy them and get them in the field. Some's on the technology side. Sometimes we're seeking new technologies. I think one of the great things about this division of our company is that we're very technology agnostic. So this doesn't have to be 100% ours. We are happy to pull in other technologies at various points. And we do that with things like the toilet of the future. We're working on one small part and we're collaborating on all these other elements of the device. And so we partner in a lot of ways, depending on the situation or the organization or what we're trying to accomplish. But we also try to be strategic and not just partner for partnering's sake, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool.
Any more questions? Cool.
So are most of your partners not in the United States, or do you have them all over? Like
all over the place. So the one great thing is we're in Seattle. We were founded in Seattle in 1969, so we've been there. We have a long history, and Seattle is kind of known as the Silicon Valley for global health, and so we have a lot of partners at our disposal right there. But we work with organizations all over the world. And a lot of the ones that we work with in Seattle have a local presence on the ground outside of the U.S.
All right, we're going to wrap up the Q&A now, but thank you, Patrick, for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Give this.
Our next speaker comes from the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, who is also a Class C Awards finalist. So if everyone could please give a warm welcome to Tyler Radford, the executive director of that organization.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for choosing to be here today. A lot of exciting stuff going on, so appreciated. I'm going to talk a little bit about not the story of one individual nonprofit, but really a global movement and how all of you sitting here can take part in that movement. So when we think about disaster as humanitarians, we often ask ourselves some basic questions. If you're not in the business of disaster relief, even as a human, we have a need to know things like, where did the disaster take place? Who was affected? What are the needs and where are those needs? So maps are a really basic way for us to help think about answering those questions. How many of you used a map in the past day or so, either to come to the event today or to find your hotel? So quite a few of you. What if the map you used looked something like this? Not too much there, right? It's pretty hard to see what's going on. Believe it or not every part of the world has been mapped yet. In those parts where there's just not good data, a lot of times there are maps, but they're old or they're on paper or they're just not easily accessible. This is the same location on a different map, something called OpenStreetMap. And OpenStreetMap is a global crowdsourced project that anyone in the world can take part of, kind of like Wikipedia. And you can see this is actually a village that was heavily impacted by the 2015 earthquake in Nepal. And this is a place where literally hundreds of families live. And you can see from this map, all the individual squares are actually buildings that were impacted by the earthquake. This is a town in the southern part of Guinea in West Africa, where some of the first cases of the Ebola epidemic were identified in 2014. And you can see from this map a few basic things. There's a river, there's a few roads there, but not much else as far as detail. So a couple of years ago, my organization, which is called Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team, or HOT for short, along with a number of other NGOs, including the American Red Cross, British Red Cross, and Doctors Without Borders, asked ourselves, how can we start to address this problem of filling in these gaps in map detail all around the world? And so a program was formed out of it called Missing Maps. You can see the logo in the middle there. And since that time, over the past couple of years, a number of NGOs and thousands of individual volunteers from around the world have actually joined to help us solve this problem, filling in the missing gaps and creating maps where good data simply doesn't exist. this is what it looks like in practice. So you can see just some of the dozens of communities around the world where this missing maps activity is going on. And so some of these are teams that our organization, HOT, helps to sponsor. Some of these are our staff. But the vast majority are individual volunteers who set up mapping events in their own communities to help put the places they live on the map for the first time. This is what it looks like at a global scale. We run something called Mapathons, and this is where we get lots of people together in a room, really fun atmosphere. We have drinks, we have pizza, and everyone brings their laptop, and all the volunteers are provided with satellite imagery. And using that satellite imagery, they're actually tracing the roads and the buildings that then become part of OpenStreetMap. And so this is what each volunteer sees. Each volunteer basically picks one little square of the map to work on, and then by having hundreds or thousands of volunteers work together, we can cover really large areas in really short periods of time. So this is what a typical volunteer would see. They'd see a satellite image. Using simple point and click, a mouse, they draw lines around the buildings. They trace the roads that they see. And this process becomes really addictive for a lot of people. It's almost like coloring in, doing a coloring book or something like that. People really want to finish their square. And after that process is done, we're left with something called vector data. And I won't get into all the details, but once we have this data, it lets us do something really exciting. We can then do analysis. So we don't not only have a satellite image, we can then count very precisely how many buildings are in a specific village that may have been affected by disaster, which helps us to plan relief efforts, estimating how many supplies are needed and in which places they're needed. So I showed you what it looks like on the global scale through Mapathons. This is what it looks like on the local scale. There's some things you can't see from a satellite image. You can't see whether a building is a school or a hospital. And that's why we have volunteers also working on the ground, walking street by street, building by building. And they use a variety of methods, high-tech and low-tech, noting down. They use GPS devices, smartphones, also pen and paper methods to note down what they see. For example, the name of a shop or whether a building is a school. And then all that data gets contributed back into OpenStreetMap and is available for any organization, any NGO working in the area. And so we've had some really incredible achievements that I'm really proud of. I'm going to just show a few examples here. This is that same town in Guinea that you saw earlier today, where some of the first Ebola cases were detected in 2014. On the left, you see that before map that I showed earlier. On the right, you see the detail in the after map. And if you walk up really close to the screen, you can see the after map is made up of tiny, tiny little dots, and each of those dots is an individual household. And essentially, over time, we've had close to 20,000 buildings were traced by just a handful of people. 68 contributors have filled in all these sort of previously areas where there were really big data gaps. So this is what it actually looked like just over a one-day period where volunteers were tracing those individual buildings and roads. So in Nepal, after the 2015 earthquake, we kind of had the same issue. There was an effort before the earthquake to help fill in some of the missing map data, but there's still a long way to go. And when the earthquake took place, our global community of HOT volunteers sprang into action and really quickly worked to create crowdsourced maps using the same technique that were then used by agencies on the ground, like the American Red Cross. In this photo, you see the Nepali Armed Forces actually using it to carry out relief activities. This is USAID teams on the ground using printed maps directly from OpenStreetMap, data that was produced by volunteers. And this was the best available data of the affected areas in Nepal. Again, this is a British Red Cross team after the earthquake in Ecuador last year, using printed maps of the affected regions in coastal Ecuador. And a recent project that we worked on is in Tanzania, where much of the city is informal, lying below sea level and prone to flooding every year. We worked with over 200 students who actually lived or were going to school throughout Dar es Salaam, and they helped us to spread throughout their own city in collaboration with a number of other partners. and put a gigantic area of their city on the map. These are places that hadn't been updated in over 15 years. And Dar es Salaam is, by many standards, the fastest growing city in Africa right now, which is increasing at population at an exponential rate. And so as this map lights up, what you're seeing are individual buildings, individual roads being added to the map by essentially volunteers and young people who want to make a contribution to their community. So again, on the left, you see what a typical neighborhood in Dar es Salaam looked like before, and on the right, you see after. So we can really start to appreciate the incredible detail, whether it's schools, health facilities, houses of worship, or just simply supermarkets that are available in the neighborhood. And all of those things, as humanitarians, as those of us who are working in disaster relief, it really helps to plan what kind of assets are there in the community, but also what needs exist in the community. And again, this is not only for disaster relief, but this can really help across all sectors to have better basic data on the places that we're working. And I'd also like to make one other point, that really it's about the maps, but it's also about the process of creating them. Through this process, we're involving young people who oftentimes don't have an opportunity to kind of learn these information technology and GIS skills, and we're providing them with formal internships and formal employment opportunities that, after working on a mapping project, they can then take and bring on, with them in their future careers. So to wrap up, we've put an area home to more than 30 million people on the global map to date. This is not something, again, that's done only by my organization. This is a global partnership where many NGOs are contributing to this, along with tens of thousands of individual volunteers. So you can see we've covered a big area, but there's still a lot to do. And so we really invite you to participate. Come map with us. Check us out online. Our website's hotosm.org. The photo of a mapathon I showed earlier, you can sponsor a mapathon or a mapping event or just a volunteer day in your workplace. It's a really fun way for people to come together and make an impact in a really short period of time. And we have projects ongoing throughout the year. You can adopt or sponsor a mapping community. Some of the communities I've shown are supported by donors from around the world. You can also set up a Youth Mappers chapter. So there's 63 universities around the world have student groups that are dedicated to contributing to these mapping projects. And they're called Youth Mappers. So through this global network, basically any university, any student group can apply to become a Youth Mappers chapter and contribute to this global project. And of course, you can be our next volunteer. So on our website, we have lots of information about how you can actually get involved and contribute to our mapping projects. So thanks very much, and happy to take any questions that you have.
So you've talked a lot about how you have volunteers doing a lot of the mapping work. And you also have a coalition of all these NGOs participating. Can you talk about what are the costs that you're incurring to run this that are not volunteers obviously work for free, but what are some of your costs that you're incurring to do this program?
Sure. So I think one thing that's really neat, so I don't know if everybody heard that. The question was about what are the costs to do this kind of work. I think one thing that's really unique is when we conceptualized this project just over 2 years ago, the NGOs that were involved, none of them had budgets dedicated to this at the time. They were all kind of seconding staff, and not even really seconding. It was more like, we'll allocate a portion of this person's time to work on this. And what we've seen over the last 2 years, so it really started as something where there were no dedicated budgets. And over time, it's grown to the point where large organizations such as American Red Cross are now seeing value in actually contributing to these activities. Number one, it's helped more donors to become engaged. And number two, it's actually informing their operations on the ground in many countries. So now there is more investment. A lot of the technology tools I've shown are developed by our organization. And so we've been really fortunate to have funders who provided us with grants to develop some of those technology tools. But really the day-to-day mapping activities, there's really low incremental cost. Like when we add an additional volunteer or somebody runs a mapathon, those are by and large volunteer-led events. So we can it really helps us to scale and grow with sort of a low core technology cost.
I'm Jason Cass with Toilets for People, and my question was, we spend a lot of time vetting our partners and also vetting the communities that would be the end recipients of the toilets that we make in country. And I'm wondering if you're able to capture more soft side information. You know, the community may not have any toilets. Let's say you could map that pretty easily.
Yeah.
But you know, is a toilet a priority for them? How much would they be willing to pay for it if it was partially subsidized? How much of a priority is it for the NGOs that are working in that area? So, not more like, it's a little bit more complicated information.
Right. Yeah, thanks for the question. So we have a number of mobile phone-based survey tools that we use, and many of you in the room might have used Open Data Kit in the past for on-the-ground data surveys. So we can customize data collection forms that collect pretty much any type of data. What I would say is that only some of that data is appropriate to actually go into a database like OpenStreetMap. Typically, the things we're mapping are things that you can physically observe in the world. So things like, it could be anything from buildings, roads, to infrastructure, to like you were talking about wells or drinking water sources. But in places where they don't exist, or you want to measure people's attitudes or opinions or behaviors, for example, that's usually better suited for a more traditional survey. You can use our tools to do that survey, but we probably wouldn't make the data public because it's often, we're focused on data that can be kind of linked to a specific geographical location.
Does your organization, wow, this is weird because I'm by the speaker. Does your organization allow volunteers to work individually, remotely? And if not, why is that the case?
Yes, so the question, yeah, we do. We have a kind of a mixed model. So some of the photos I showed earlier were volunteers kind of working in teams together to collect data on the ground doing surveys. We also have some of our best volunteers are kind of like a lone wolf volunteer, where we have somebody does this as a hobby. We have a lot of students helping out, but we also have a lot of older people who've retired from their careers and do this a couple hours a day as a hobby from their homes or workplaces or schools. So yeah, I mean, people can contribute in both ways, both as individuals and as part of teams.
Hi, it's Evan from UNICEF USA. I was just wondering, how do you maintain the accuracy of your data and the mapping over time? How do you guarantee that what we see in 2013 is the same as what's still there in 2018? Is there a process to review, basically?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so data accuracy was the question. It's definitely a challenging area. I think a good analogy might be for everyone to think about Wikipedia, say 10 years ago. If you guys remember when Wikipedia was first starting up, there was a lot of questions that some of the articles weren't of the best quality. It was kind of, people were really skeptical. Over time, because so many people are contributing to the project, it got really better and better, and those articles were improved. And nowadays, people actually rely on them. Most of them are really well cited, have really good sources. Similar approach for OpenStreetMap is that there's 3 million contributors to OpenStreetMap around the world. So in the cases where there are data problems or errors, or if one volunteer makes a mistake, there's usually many, many other people working in that mapping that same area, and they'll often come and make corrections. The other way we do it on all our mapping projects, we have a two-step approach where one volunteer will make a first pass over the area, and then a second volunteer actually comes and does what we do, validation. So it's two sets of eyes covering, when we're mapping a place for the first time, it's always 2 passes to make sure that a second person validates the work of the first person.
Sorry, it sounds weird up close. I was just wondering about, I guess, I'm sure you guys have thought about applying like some sort of image recognition and maybe it's for accuracy. I was just wondering why use volunteers versus just like crunching it through some sort of machine?
Sure. Yeah, so I think what we found is that we do collaborate with some other organizations that are working on sort of artificial intelligence or machine learning. And to basically, when you guys saw the building sort of footprints, we call them, which is the squares around the buildings, a lot of people ask that question, why can't you just automate that? You can in some cases, but what we found is that it's really specific to the context. Like in some countries, buildings are in the middle of a jungle, or they're round instead of square, and it's really hard to develop algorithms that work universally across all contexts and across all countries. So it is a priority for us. At the same time, we found that our volunteers, number one, really enjoy the work, and we want to keep them engaged, so there's that aspect of it. And number two, they simply are producing the best results available right now. So the data produced by a human is still better and more accurate than what's being produced by the algorithms. I think if in the future for us, it might be a hybrid approach where we have an algorithm sort of doing part of it, and then we have a human validating that work.
I really have about 2 more minutes, so any final questions? If not, they'll be here for the rest of the day, so feel free to stop by and say hi to them, ask any other questions. But thank you, Tyler, for your time.
Thanks, Taylor. Yeah.
And yeah, thanks for coming.